Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. Excuse me. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to join the community debate, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate forum. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by The Plain Truth, Sleeping Warrior, Paul, Flatzoid, Chocolate Sane, and 10th Man. Very good to have you all.
Woohoo! I'm not really here, but you can act as though I am.
Good to see you.
Good to have you all. Any signs of Earth curvature, gentlemen? Any signs of Earth curvature?
There is no signs of Earth curvature, but you can act as though there is.
Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
There is no evidence for axial rotation, but you can imagine that there is.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Scientific evidence of what?
Gravity, scientific evidence thereof.
There's definitely no evidence for scientific evidence for gravity, but again, you can imagine that there is.
About the distance to the sun?
It doesn't work with that one.
There is no distance to the sun, but you can act as though there is.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, well saved there, Travis. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
There is definitely no evidence of a molten iron core, but you can imagine that there is.
Any evidence of Earth radius, the R value?
Nope. I'm not doing it again.
Fair enough.
So, I had a really good conversation in Channel Q.
I'm finished. One more.
Oh.
Any evidence that you can have a gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container for all the fundies who believe in the sky vacuum, otherwise known as outer space?
You cannot have gas pressure next to a vacuum without a container, but you can imagine as though there is one.
Excellent. That concludes the housekeeping. Shout out to George Musa.
So I had a really good conversation last night with Lewis Hackett in Channel Q. Shout out to Channel Q. I didn't know she'd contributed in that way. I thought she just trolled the chats, if I'm honest. And I saw that she was live, and I was like, Channel Q, is that the same one? Clicks in, and sure enough, there she was chatting away. And she has a public link because she's learned how to use OBS. And I was proper impressed. I was like, right, I'm going in there. So I went in there, and I basically wanted to see what the position was with regards to this gravity is a force, but not really a force, but we can call it a force, but it's not a force, but it is a force. It's a bit like Little Britain where he goes, yeah, but is gravity a force? Yeah, but no, but yeah, but no, but yeah, but no, or whatever it was. Catherine Tate, I think it was actually. Anyway, my point was I wanted to see what their arguments were, how this would go down. And basically, they don't like the word, in the definitions in Wikipedia where it says Einstein superseded Newtonian principles. They don't like that word supersede. So we get the definition up and the definition states replaced, right? It didn't add to or whatever, but they don't like that word replaced. So what they did was they went into scientific theories and they got a definition for scientific theories that are no longer considered to be scientific theories anymore, right? And they found a part where it says specifically that parts of Newton's theory are still used today, but his overall theory is now obsolete. So I'm like, right, do you know what obsolete means? And I'm like, yeah, but forget about what obsolete means. Let's look at the bit where it says parts of his theory are still used today. And I'm like, okay, so what parts are still used today then? And basically, there is no answer. They haven't come up with an answer for it yet, but they assume that the part that they can use today is the gravity bit. And I'm like, but you do realize that the word supersede for gravitation, according to Einstein, replaces that bit that you're trying to use. It doesn't allow you to use it because parts of his theory may still apply. We want to see the parts that do apply, and we want to see how they apply, because if they contradict the current science, then it means that you can't use it. So it's either it contradicts current science because you can't use gravity as a force anymore, or it doesn't. But we haven't found the parts of Newton's gravitation that they can use, because we know that the force bit is the bit that's been replaced. But that because it didn't say which parts of Newton's are still in use today, we just don't know what the answer is. But obviously they assumed that the gravity being a force was the bit that they wanted to be able to use. And I'm like, no, you're not having it. It's gone. So if anybody knows what part of Newtonian mechanical principles for gravitation, what parts are still in use today that we can use that are dealing specifically with whether or not it's a force, can we have the answer, please, on the ball side? Because I don't know what parts we still use. I'd like to know which of the parts that we still use. And if anyone knows, feel free to join us, particularly the rumpus. I'd love to know what the answer is. I'm done.
Wait, are we talking about the guys that didn't know what superseded mean?
Yeah.
And, yeah, I saw that. I saw that last night.
Superseded, it means replaced, right? Yeah, but what about this bit down here?
No,
It
it means you could use it until it doesn't work anymore. Then you use the Einstein. Like, what? Are you kidding?
Yeah, how's about superseding gets rid of all of it? It supersedes it. You can't have it. It's like injection fuel systems on the car. By 1992 or something like that, it was a law in the UK that all new cars could not be fitted with carburetors. Carburetors still work. They're reliable, they're dependable. They need a little bit of maintenance every now and again, but there's still a way to power your car. But we don't use them anymore. But they do still exist. But petrol and diesels have all been replaced with injection systems. So what we can say is that the injection system has replaced and superseded the carburetor. Now, we can still use the carburetor, but you just can't manufacture cars anymore with it because you're not allowed to anymore. You have to use injection. But because we can still use the carburetor and it practically works, doesn't mean that you can actually do away with the fact that injection has replaced the carburetor. It's not acceptable. So what we need to know is where does it say in Newtonian principles that we can still use gravity as a force? Because that's the bit that they're trying to rely on. All the other stuff they're not bothered about. So all the force equals mass times all the laws of motion and all that, they're not bothered about that at the moment. They want to use their claim, which is, well, there are little bits of it that we still can use, and we're claiming them little bits to be gravity, and gravity's still a force. So we can still have Cavendish, and we can still claim that the atmosphere sticks to the ball. And I'm saying, like, I want to see that. Which bits of Newtonian principles can we still use, and for what reason? So that's where we need to take the argument now. Let's see what happens.
I don't see how we could use any of it after he said that Newton himself didn't take it literally.
Well, they've got a definition that states that old antiquated theories in science, although they may have been superseded by something else, there are small parts of it that they might still be able to use. Now, I would say the small parts of it aren't going to include the fundamental principle that is gravity as a force. That's kind of like the whole point of Newton. So I don't think it covers that. But we don't know because it didn't itemize what were the bits that could still be used. It just said that small parts of it could be. But I don't think gravity being a force would be counted as a small part when it was the fundamental principle that he was building all of his work on. So we need to know what...
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I was just going to say hello to our new guests.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Physics Warrior. And hey, is it Proficient?
Yeah, Proficient Pirate.
I just want to say something about Anthony's debate with Lewis yesterday on Channel Q's.
Go ahead.
So, there's this trap that the ballers like to use whenever we're talking about relative density being the cause of like the downward force that we're observing. They like defining the objects that are being observed in terms of weight rather than mass. And the problem with that is that when you agree to define what you're observing by its weight, you're indirectly agreeing to gravity because weight is linked to gravity, to a downward force. So what Lewis was doing was maybe directly or indirectly trying to get you to admit that the effect that you're observing was being caused by the weight of the.
I do know that. That's why I kept saying now, but that wasn't my independent variable, was it? My independent variable was the density of the liquid that I changed, not the mass.
Right. Okay.
The density. I changed the mass of the liquid and the density, but I didn't change the weight. Because he said to me, didn't he, why didn't you get some scales? And I'm like, because I'm not measuring the weight. I'm measuring the difference between the densities between the two. So you're talking about two. Well, I totally agree that what
And
he
he
was trying
agreed
to
to that too. He also
Yeah.
agreed to that.
Yeah, but
he had to
some
throw in the buoyancy nonsense too.
Yeah.
Right. To some degree, Lewis was right, though, because by adding salt to the water, you are, in fact, increasing the weight. But you could also say that you're increasing its mass or its
Correct.
concentration.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what they've done is they've found a different way to describe the same event, right? And now, what that basically means is if I witness a bank robbery and you witness the same bank robbery but from a different perspective, you'll have a slightly different but very similar way to interpret the same event. And that's what he's doing. He's just using maths to mean different things. Now, he doesn't realize it, maybe, or maybe he does, I don't know. But you're absolutely right. The minute they get you to try, if you accidentally don't realize that that weight is what they're talking about, you immediately invoke little g and gravitation. You're absolutely right. But that's why I kept him on the definition for independent variable. I said, what was the thing that I changed? And it was obviously the density. And that's why I measured it. And I showed the parts per million before and after. And that's why I said that independent variable is the presumed cause. Why would you infer that there's some other cause, some other buoyant force? That's not what we changed. We changed this. That's the cause, not your thing that you're now adding to it. And that's why I was pinning him in the corner, and he wouldn't, because he knows he can't admit to it. But they're clever, these ballers. They know the arguments.
Oh, yeah, they are. I'm starting to see a strategy pattern that they're using here. They like to ask questions that are either impossible to answer or questions that are going to lead into a narrative that they've already created that they want you to fall into. And that's exactly what Lewis did yesterday. Another problem with the whole density and buoyancy equation as being the cause and effect of what we're observing is the formula itself. The formula includes G, which is gravity. So that's another trap they can get you into. They can say, okay, if it's buoyancy and density that's causing this phenomenon that we're observing, then it's being caused by gravity because the formula itself has G.
That's why I said to them, that's why I won't let them say density and buoyancy. That's why I use the phrase relative density, because that doesn't use the term buoyancy, and it directly relates to the medium that you're in at the time. Nathan, could you do me a favor, Nathan? Would you mind pulling up the Wikipedia and just typing in buoyancy? And there's a really good diagram on there now. Last time I looked at it, it didn't have this diagram. I don't remember, but there's a really good one there now. So I can really make a good point about this buoyancy argument, because you're right. When they say weight, that means little g's involved. But also what Lewis needed to do and tried to do, and I wouldn't let him, and he stamped his feet. And basically, I called him a moron once in the whole hangout. And he said, you've just done it. And I was like, do you know what? I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you a moron. But it's because when Nathan gets it up now, hopefully we'll get it on screen. What Lewis was trying to do. Are you with it, Nathan?
Yeah, it's on screen.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see it. Hang on. Let me see whether it's...
I can see it.
There we go. So if you zoom into that picture, if you can, Nathan, on the right-hand side, just Control and plus, and it'll zoom in. What Lewis is trying to do is I'm literally manipulating the density of the fluid. Now, so the object that's there is obviously the egg. The density of the fluid is what I changed. But can you see how gravity is pushing down? And
you've got to keep yourself on mute. Hello?
So can you see it?
Hold on, Anthony. Flazoid, you've got your mic wide open.
Yeah, just sit yourself on mute just while I explain, and then you can come back to me. So I changed the fluid. I changed the density of the fluid, but I didn't change the density of the egg, obviously. That changed the position of the egg for whatever reason. But see how he's inferring gravity and therefore buoyancy. He's missing the effect of changing the density of the fluid. Now, I haven't gone out public with this yet because I'm waiting for someone to do it. And I thought Lewis was going to do it last night, but he didn't. The point got lost because we started shouting at each other, and then I called him a moron, and I shouldn't have done. So apologies, Lewis. But when he starts inferring that gravity's pushing down on the egg, but there's a buoyant force pushing back up the other way, he's ignoring what's the effect of changing the density of the fluid instead. Because when you change the density of the fluid...
Actually, I think what Lewis was trying to say was that when you're changing the concentration of the salt in the mixture, you're increasing its weight. And what he was trying to equate that to was that the weight of the liquid was pushing the egg and forcing it upwards.
What you're actually doing is you're increasing the pressure in that part of the liquid where the salt's dissolving. Because as you add more mass to the liquid, it's increasing the pressure on the walls of the container. And it's that pressure that squeezes the egg up. So he's ignoring the effects of changing the mass or the density of the liquid by adding more mass. Yes, you can argue it's weight, but that involves little g. But what's really happening is you're increasing the mass in the bottom part of that container, which is creating pressure, and it increases the pressure. And what we see is the egg reacting to the change in the pressure. So it's a visual indicator of the change in the pressure that we see. But there's no need and falls outside a scientific method to imply that there's gravity pushing down and a buoyant force pushing back up, because I didn't change the buoyant force pushing back up, and that's the presumed cause. If you want to infer...
Lewis was saying that the pressure is being caused by the gravity of the mixture itself.
But that's changing what the independent variable was. The independent variable was changing the liquid and the density of the liquid, which increases the pressure, and that's what's displacing the egg. But Lewis is saying, no, gravity's pushing down on the egg, and there's a buoyant force pushing back up, but he's putting it down to gravity. But that's not what was changed. What was changed was
he's trying to equate the pressure force to gravity. The pressure that you're talking about, the differential, he's trying to equate that force with gravity.
But he should be equating that force with the change in the density of the fluid that I changed. That's why I did it. And I really laboured that point. And it's not fair, but they do it anyway, that they call it creepy that I did it. But I emphasised and laboured that point for a really good reason. And it's to stop them from doing what they did, what he tried to do last night. So, yeah, you can call it creepy. But if I win the point, mate, because you're inferring an extra cause that isn't there, the cause is the thing that I manipulated. Remember that. It's what I changed. Not the bit that you're inferring. It's the bit that I changed. So what do we know what happens when you increase the mass of the liquid and the density changes? You increase the pressure on the inside of the container. We know that. We can demonstrate it. But what we see is the egg reacting to that change in pressure. And that change in pressure is pushing that egg up. They call it a buoyant force subject to the gravitational force. But gravitational force wasn't the cause. The thing that I manipulated was the cause. I'm within scientific method. Them morons are not. So that's the difference. I hope everybody got that then, because that is what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. I get it. And the strategy that the ballers use is, just like I said initially, is to ask you repeated questions in the hopes that they're going to catch you slipping, because you're going to encounter a question that you're not going to be able to answer. Then that's the gotcha moment. And that's exactly what they're looking for. They're not concerned with the answers that you're providing to them. They just want you to be caught off guard or slipping.
These guys don't even care about what their own scientific priests say.
Yeah.
This guy comes out yesterday and says gravity is not a force, and these guys are still running around talking about gravity is a force.
Well, because they can bend. They have the liberty to bend and switch between definitions as much as they can. So
of course, they have to. They have to. They have to hold on to this imaginary thing, this unicorn fart called gravity.
And Riley, it's just like they were doing to you with astrology. You said astrology by mistake one time, and they brought it up like it was the only thing you were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, that was a genuine misspeak, right? What difference does it make when it's astrology over astronomy? It doesn't make. It wasn't even a contentious point, but he brought it up as though he'd just shot his mum, and I was like, "What? Come on, that's not even. It's the nothing point." But that's what happens. It's madness.
And by definition, how Lewis was using the force of gravity in terms of how it was acting upon the egg, that's not how gravity works. By definition, if he was talking about Newtonian gravity, isn't it mass attracting mass? It's not a pushing force. So he was not defining it correctly. He was trying to say that the solution was pushing the egg and shifting its position, but that's not how gravity works in the Newtonian model.
That's again the reason why I mentioned in the video. I said just to be aware that there is an issue here with if I increase the mass below the egg, I've also added to the mass of the that's also below the egg, right? So if I've increased the mass of the Earth and added to it with the salt, then that should attract the egg, but it didn't. It pushed it away. So it doesn't
Exactly. Yeah.
doesn't really matter which way they argue it. Either way, they're knackered. But you're absolutely right. They will try and get me to agree to the word force, and the minute I do that, that allows them to use buoyancy, and that's why I wouldn't agree to. They'll get me to agree to the word weight, and the minute they do that, that brings in little g, and then they can claim buoyancy. And I'm like, no, I didn't change the weight. I changed the density of the liquid. Yeah, but you also changed the weight, didn't you? Yeah, but I'm not measuring that, am I? I'm measuring this. This is the change I made. I'm measuring this. I'm not measuring that because that's where they break the word weight.
Exactly. The moment you admit to weight, then you've lost the debate because you admitted to gravity.
And it's all done in maths. Notice how what they do. Well, if you agree to weight, it's done mathematically. Now, it doesn't change the fact that by adding salt to the liquid, it does change the density of the liquid. That bit does not change, right? But they've somehow forgotten about that, and they've managed to mathematically get out of it, and it's crazy.
Well, they're assigning a starting point to a relative direction by having weight, because obviously weight is being measured in a specific direction against a spring downwards. So then you can have that as your starting point and extrapolate out from there. Well, we don't observe a arbitrary down for everything. That's not how it works. It's relative to the medium, as we keep saying. So to assign down in weight is where they tie the relative direction so that they can then have everything assigned to down and a counteracting force if you have anything opposing it. So it's the weight aspect that ties the direction down, and direction is relative.
Hey guys, I was thinking, wouldn't evidence for gravity be just like self-evident every single day and inherent in our life, and we could actually use it to advance processes and like in different industries to actually help us if it was a real thing?
If it was a real thing, you could observe it. That's why we ask for the observed phenomena.
Well, it functions perfectly well to presuppose it, but yeah, that's why it's an aberration. You can use it. There's nothing really there. It's kind of like a suggestive side effect of how nature is rearranged.
Yeah, once you assign a position relative to us in our medium.
I'll tell you what was another amazing misrepresentation.
Go on, Paul.
Yeah, I think Nathan's definition of what the cause and effective is with equilibrium, and this equilibrium is the best example because that way you don't have to deal with G in any kind of way. But sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Oh no, I'm just looking at that diagram that Nathan pulled up. I found it for myself. What if they're attributing something that's just the way the system interacts with each other? Like they're trying to attribute a force to something that really is just the way the system dynamically operates, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like it's like what's that?
That is what that is what relative density is. The way it works is what we see. But what they need to do is bastardize the word weight, include gravity, and then they can calculate it mathematically based on that assumption, right? That definition. Well, that's not what we actually see, because we don't see this thing pushing down on you or pulling it down on you. We just see everything that seems to be relative, because remember, Newton's third law, which is always forgotten in this context, is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So it's a balance. It's not a force pulling something down, because you've got to remember that part. And they don't. They ignore that part because they need that. They just need to infer that gravitational force to get the buoyant force. And if you don't let them do that and stick to scientific method, they can't win. They have to spit the dummy out, and it's really good.
But then quantum erasure will come in and tell you that Newton laws are all nonsense anyway. So
I know. But that's
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? Because I do agree with you.
I don't think he said that ever. Quite the contrary. At the moment, he's saying Newton has been very specific about not ascribing gravity to him. So you look into the actual claimed experiment, and it's Reverend John Mitchell and Cavendish. And G doesn't come along till what? How long? How many? I don't know. Quite a considerable time later. So No, it's not Newton. In fact, he's,
Really? So he
John is
agrees
trying to steer
with
away
the
from.
force, the
John is
concept
trying
of
to.
force.
He agrees to the concept of
I think
force. He just doesn't agree that there's anything causing any force.
I don't think he agrees to the equation of force though. That because I did hear him say that one time that that equation might be off. Because obviously, what's mass, right?
Well, I think we can go at this a little differently, though. I mean, if what we're seeing through the density and mass and all that stuff is just the way that objects interact with each other in a closed system where all the potential substances, I'm trying to figure out the right words to say, are interacting. They need gravity only when it comes to how you deal with the heavenly bodies. So they have to attribute gravity, this force that reaches out over vast distances. That's why they have to bring it into the equation. So you're trying to use a ground-based terrestrial.
Gravity just makes it so much simpler. That's it.
Riley, in the hangout yesterday, didn't one of the Globers say something like, "Oh, we use Newton gravity for things on Earth, but then once it gets to outer space, then we're talking about that's when the Einsteinian gravity kicks in." Wasn't that Channel Q or the other dude?
Yeah, because I tried to get them to explain how it's different on Earth, that we can't use Einstein's, which is supposed to be the current science. Why can't we use Einsteinian techniques, which is the current science, on Earth, right? And they say because Newtonian works fine. It's like, yeah, but A, it supersedes it, and B, if one's supposed to be built on top of the other and refines it, why aren't you applying that one? Because that's the
it is.
That's like
Einsteinian improves the
You can't
bending of
simply do
space-time.
this. It doesn't replace it. It really doesn't. It's only that one statement that you got, not directly from Einstein himself, even. Okay.
No, it's
what
not.
Basically, it is extrapolated on how the supposed gravity of Newton on the Earth functions
Arwen,
outside, and can give a ethereal base reason as to how the gravity manifests.
Arwen, you seem to have got that one wrong. There are umpteen sources that literally state that Einstein did supersede and replace not one, umpteen.
And did Einstein himself say
it? I don't know, actually. I'll have to look to see whether he actually did.
Yeah.
Out no proof. Says Globers are hilarious. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate your support.
I agree.
Let me ask you guys something as witnesses, right? You know, when I bring up that 50 million to one citation, you know the one I'm on about, the one that I always bring up. Does anybody remember where I get that citation from?
No.
Don't you get it from
a
the
magazine?
Cavendish
You got it
himself?
from a.
You got it from a magazine.
One at a
You showed
time.
it yesterday.
The article from American Scientist.
Yeah.
No, that's not right. Chocolate got it right. So, Chocolate, don't you answer. Nathan, do you remember where I specifically cite it from?
No, not off the top of my head.
I cite it from the Henry Cavendish experiment, the paper that he actually submitted to the Royal Society, dated 18 whatever it is, or 1796 or whatever it is. I cite it from his actual paper. Now, I did Blue Marble Science. The guy that can't tie his shoelaces. He's done a so-called debunk video where he's basically he's laughing at me, right, which is fine. But what he does is he says, "And Anthony, you've got this 50 million to one citation." Now, in the video, I said, literally, it comes from Cavendish's paper, right? And that means it comes from Cavendish's paper. It does not mean it comes from Wikipedia. So what he's done is he's rather than listen to what I actually said, which is it comes from Cavendish's paper, which is where I always cite it from because it's the primary source document. He said, "You've got this from Wikipedia." And I'm like, I told you where I got it from. I didn't put it on screen because I've just assumed that he's seen it because I cite it that many times. I don't know how he's not seen it. But he says, "You've got this from Wikipedia." And it doesn't even say that. Now, I didn't even know it said that in Wikipedia article because I never use it. I always use the one from the Royal Society, the actual paper. And what it says in Wikipedia is not quite the same as what it says in Cavendish's paper. It's slightly different. And what that means is he's thought that I've misrepresented it, right? Despite me saying where I'd got it from. So when he's then gone to use it against me, I'm like, do you know what? He's actually got half a point there if you accept that it's the Wikipedia citation that I actually used. It's not. I use the citation from Cavendish, and it is slightly different in Wikipedia. Not a lot different, but it's enough to make it look like I've got it wrong.
What's his half a point? Hold on. Sorry, guys. Hold on. You said he's got half a point. I know you're saying if you accept his misrepresentation, but what was his half a point?
It was to do with the way that it's cited on Wikipedia. It's not been copied verbatim from the paper on Wikipedia.
No, I get
Somebody's
that.
trying.
I get that. What's the context?
You'd have to get it on the screen to be able to see the difference. But in the Cavendish paper, which is where I always cite it from, it says the mass between the balls is excessively minute, not more than a 50 millionth to one. But it references the force between the balls. But on Wikipedia, it says it's the force of the smaller ball. So it doesn't reference the interaction between the balls. It's claiming to be the force of gravitation just from one ball. It doesn't address the other ball. I mean, you might want to pull it up, Nathan. Just look at the definition for Cavendish under that article on Wikipedia.
Well,
and
in the article, did they state how Cavendish calculated the force being a 50 millionth to one between objects? What apparatus did he use to measure that force?
The Cavendish
or was he
balls.
observing it?
The Cavendish balls. That's what he used.
That's the main point. What did he actually use to get that value? Did he just pluck it out of his ass, or what? Where did he get it from?
Got it from observing the Cavendish quote-unquote experiment, which it's not.
No, it's always been my big question. Where did he get the 50 million to one? I know that's the claim.
Okay.
He observed it. But why 50 million and why not 20 million?
Sure, that's been laboured, right. You've got it from Cavendish himself, from his paper.
I've got it, yeah. But where did he get it from? Where did he get that number from?
Sure. What I'm saying is that number is the extrapolation of a pseudoscience experiment. So where did he get the number from? He plucked it out his arse for all I care. It makes no difference because his musings on a pseudoscience quote-unquote experiment are meaningless, irrelevant, nonsensical gibberish. They make no difference to anything because the experiment doesn't prove anything. It's conjuring a natural phenomena that doesn't exist. So we don't observe mass attracting mass. That doesn't happen. Cavendish claims it happens in the experiment. Well, you're supposed to observe that phenomena and then try and figure out what causes it, rather than conjuring it within the test. So after conjuring something from nothing, hey Chris, same Chris, after conjuring something from nothing, he then comes up with some formulas and numbers to describe what he's apparently observed in his test. It's just meaningless shit. That's why, as I say, yesterday when I was explaining that this is a very nuanced argument that is based on the rhetoric, it's akin to me creating with old bits of horse something that looks like a unicorn, sticking a load of wires in it, writing up a paper and saying that there's a 1 in 50 million chance that that unicorn will become a real unicorn. And that's true because science says so. And then you coming along and going, well, let's pick apart the 50 million to 1 chance of it becoming a real unicorn because we've never actually observed that. And how do you get that number? Where do you get that number from? And I go, I get it from the experiment I did on my horse parts that have got a unicorn horn stuck to it. And you go, well, that's not a real experiment. Well, shouldn't that be the end of the argument? No, let's argue about the extrapolation from my unicorn. No, it's just meaningless nonsense.
And I don't understand how he claims that I've misrepresented it when I told him the citation. To be fair, I didn't put it on screen because, like I say, I thought everybody knows that I cite it from the paper, but obviously he's quite new to it and he presumably doesn't know. So despite me saying Cavendish himself in his paper said 50 million to 1, he somehow went to Wikipedia and then said that that's where I got it from. And to be fair to him, it is slightly different in Wikipedia. It'd be good to show it, Nathan, actually, if you can be bothered. If you don't want it, it's fine. But it does describe it differently on Wikipedia.
Not really.
I've heard you say plenty of times that's from Cavendish himself. That's how I remember it.
Yeah.
So I made sure to remember it because this is coming from Cavendish himself. Okay.
Yeah. His actual paper.
Billy Blueballs isn't worth this effort, if you ask me. The fact that he's misrepresented what you've said when you've made it very clear, as you know, I do remember you saying it's from Cavendish himself. You know, on at least a couple of occasions now, you've jogged my memory. And had I been watching the video and responded to it, I'd be expected to know that, given that you said it. So, you know, the fact that he's misrepresented your argument is kind of, who cares? It's not really the nub of the main argument anyway. Cavendish isn't an experiment. So who cares?
Yeah, and it's also not valid for the same reason that Bob, the science guy's experiment isn't valid. You know, when he pulls out his accelerometer and says, look at what my accelerometer is doing. So therefore gravity exists. But he's just looking at the effect. He's not really proving what's causing it.
If you think about it as well in the context of 50 million to one, right? If you have a car that breaks down and you want to push it off the road onto the curb, if you apply a force that's 50 millionth of the car's weight, that car ain't going to move. It's not going to have any effect on it whatsoever.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's such a negligible amount to ever be able to even measure.
It's really, yeah, that's why I think that Einstein had quoted his parts per trillion, because I reckon that scales were getting close enough to be able to measure it back in the day. Because when Cavendish said it back in 1790 or whatever it was, whatever year it was, obviously they didn't have accuracy in scales because he obviously pitched it far enough that they would never catch up with him. Anyway, I reckon that by the time early 1900s, given that they had electric cars that could do 200 miles on a charge, and they had other technology that we currently don't have, but seem to have gone backwards from, which is another topic. But I reckon that they were getting scales that were precise enough to get towards that 50 million to one, and people were beginning to test it, and obviously not getting nowhere. So they thought, shit, we better move the goalposts here. Let's not call it 50 million to one. Let's call it parts in a trillion instead. How can we get such an infinitesimally small amount? I know. Let's call it time dilation. Parts in a trillion. No one will ever measure that. And that's what I reckon's happened.
While that might very well be the case, we are working within their narrative when you argue about 50 million to one. So you're into the begging the question fallacy and saying whether or not you would see the effects of a 50 millionth of the object's weight. It's the same principle as arguing about whether rockets would work in a medium that doesn't exist, rather than attacking the fact that space is fake and a violation of a law of nature. You argue about whether or not rockets would actually work in said violation of a law of nature. So with this, it's the same as far as I'm concerned. You're begging the question that there's this force. There is no force, but you're begging the question that there is one, and it's a 50 millionth, and whether or not you would experience that 50 millionth. So it's working on the premise that there is this force, and just whether or not you could experience that force. So it begs the question.
And the other thing I noticed in the hangout last night was that basically, like the medium of space, we realised that if you can't have gas pressure in the medium of a vacuum, it means that space itself either doesn't exist the way we're told, or there's got to be a membrane up there separating us from it. Now, what they've twisted that into mean is that, yes, well, you have to deny space if you're on their side, because otherwise you can't have gas pressure in a container. But they're making it out as though we have to deny it, rather than it's the consequence of realizing that you can't have gas pressure in a vacuum, right?
I kind of get that. It's a really ham-handed straw man, because saying that you can't have gas pressure in a container when the only time you will ever have gas pressure at all is if you have something for it to press upon. It's the necessary antecedent of gas pressure, the ability to press on something. So if they're saying, well, no, our system with nothing to press upon is far more likely to be real, because obviously gas likes pressing on a vacuum. Well, no, that's utter horseshit. It doesn't in any way address the argument. It's just poor show. Just flappings from a dying fundy group that have a belief that's being debunked.
What I'm saying is they flipped it around. We noticed that you can't have one, therefore the other can't exist. They're saying you have to deny space if blah, blah, blah. And it's the opposite way around. They flipped it on its head to make it look like we're being irrational. And we're just trying to apply their science and realizing that there's issues with it. Real issues, but they just ignore.
But making us seem irrational is fine. You only have to have half a brain to actually realize which side of the argument has the winning argument. We have, on our side, a law of nature. Nobody on the other side's shown us a defiance of that law of nature, ever. However, they believe the only defiance of that law of nature is the sky. A vacuum, apparently, according to them. No demonstration of it, and it violates the law of nature. Now, if they're going to say, well, you have to deny that the sky is a vacuum. Yeah, that's precisely what I'm doing, because, I'll repeat, it violates a law of nature, something you will never ever demonstrate to us. But you will tell us that we must believe. No worries. Yeah, I will deny that the sky is a vacuum, It isn't. It can't be. That's impossible. It violates a law of nature. If it was, the gas would fill the space, and we would all be at 10 to the minus 17 torr here at sea level. We're not. We do have gas pressure, so it's definitely pressing on something, and that something is definitely not a vacuum. It wouldn't press on a vacuum. It would disperse into a vacuum till it reached equilibrium, and we would be at 10 to the minus 17 torr here at sea level. We're not. So obviously the necessary antecedent we can demonstrate millions of times over, no problem at all. We can demonstrate that you can have gas pressure and a gas pressure gradient in a container. In fact, you must have a container. Without it, you have no gas pressure.
Yeah, because the only way to contain gas is in a container. So we have gases within our atmosphere. How are they in our atmosphere if they're not being contained in some kind of way?
Well, moreover, the assertion that the sky is a vacuum would mean that the gas would fill the space. It would disperse. Entropy would take hold. Entropy would increase, and it would fill the space because it hasn't anything to resist it doing so. So if there's a sky vacuum, which there isn't, then the gas would fill it.
Yeah, and they claim that we don't understand what the term vacuum means, that it's not a sucking kind of action. But even if that wasn't the case, through like osmosis, the gases would still diffuse to the area of least concentration, even if they're not necessarily being pulled out of their position.
Oh, that's not osmosis. That's entropy.
Entropy or diffusion. Or entropy, yeah. You're right, it is entropy. Yeah.
Entropy and dispersion. So the gas, highly charged particles are trying to move randomly in all directions until they hit something, either another particle or the walls of a container. Now, if there are no walls of a container, it will just travel in all directions indefinitely. That's what it'll do. So if there's a vacuum up there, what's it going to do? Bounce off the vacuum and come back again, giving us the pressure, i.e. pressing on something? No, it'll just disperse into it. There's nothing for it to stop. There's nothing to stop it. So, the gas goes up, it expands, goes in all directions, doesn't just go down, it goes up as well. And then what happens when it reaches the top? It just keeps on going. No, that can't be possible.
Does an entropy deal with thermal energy, though?
It deals with everything, any energy.
Didn't they claim there's a hard, fast layer?
Say again?
Didn't they claim there's a hard, fast layer in the atmosphere? It's in the atmosphere plane.
If there's a hard, fast layer...
That's the way they described it. I can't remember what exactly it was that they were talking about, but I've heard that term before.
Sure, yeah. I think it's NASA describing it as a glass ceiling when they're describing what they call the Van Allen belts. A hard, fast layer, a glass ceiling. That's how they describe it.
Yeah, there was the Van Allen belts, yep.
Right. Well, the Van Allen belts that NASA creates, the people who tell us that the moon rings, right? The people who tell us that they've got moon buggies up there.
Yeah, exactly. Coming from the worst possible source.
Yeah, these liars tell us about the belts and what they are, and that we can't get through them. Oh, so there's a hard, fast layer, but we can get to the moon and Mars. It's just double speak. Somebody's got a really crackly mic.
I love how we're called the science deniers, right?
Hold on, Chocolate. Can you keep yourself on mute, Anthony? You're crackling at the hangout.
Sorry. I love how we're called the science deniers, but these guys have somebody who's got credibility in their little science community that comes out and tells them, hey guys, can't take gravity literally as a force. It's not a force.
No, it's
even
magical.
Newton himself didn't take it literally. So you can't take it literally. You could use it in math, but you can't take it literally. And these guys are still running around saying it's a literal force.
They need it to be a force.
Aberration. It's an aberration.
It's got to be a force to work in their model.
It does. Now, at the end of the day, right?
We suppose that it is.
At the end of the day, right? If you'd killed somebody or you hadn't killed somebody, but you were able to act as though you either had killed somebody or hadn't killed somebody, whichever, you were able to act as the opposite. That wouldn't be acceptable, would it? You've either killed somebody or you haven't. You can't say one, but not the. But then you can treat them as the other. No, that's not how it works. You
It's
either
like
killed
Schrodinger's
somebody.
cat.
Pardon?
I mean, even if we did give them gravity and said that that's what was causing it, they can't manipulate that. They can't wiggle it. So it
Well,
still can't be proven either way.
By their
that's
own words, they still don't know what it is. They still don't know what the cause is.
yes, that wiggling
Exactly. Yeah.
requirement. The wiggling requirement is the difference between why the egg moved. Because I wiggled it. That's the assumed cause in scientific method. You can't infer that it's something else because you didn't wiggle that other thing that you're claiming that was the cause. And that's why we have to focus in on these words, because when it suits them, semantic definitions are important for them, right? But when it doesn't suit them, semantics becomes a dirty word. But we have semantics for a reason. And when it says things like up means up, down means down, or blue means blue but not red, you know what I mean? It's these kind of words that the minutiae, the definitions are important. So literally, like you can't
Dude,
have
I was
an
so
independent.
surprised yesterday when you literally looked up the definition of supersede. Everybody read it, and they were like, "Nope, that's not it." I was sitting
Yeah,
there
I mean,
laughing
because
like,
the first thing that pops into most people's heads when you mention weight is how heavy something is. Like people aren't thinking about a downward force, so you're naturally just gonna think that when someone mentions weight, they're just talking about how heavy something is, and that's the trap that they're trying to get you into.
Yep.
By definition.
And it is a trap because everybody understands what when we say colloquially what weight means. Everybody understands it's just however it is, right? However that's when you put it on scales, however it is. But it destroys the argument for you if you agree to it. So you do have to be astute.
you. I gotta shout out Cleary real quick. He put up a video yesterday of Vsauce, which I cannot stand that guy at all. But I'm listening to this video because he's talking about gravity and he's talking about space time and all this crap. And at one point, he says that he's putting as much pressure as the Earth is putting on him, something to that effect. So he stands on a scale and it comes out to a $1.80. So then what he does is he turns the scale around, puts it face down on the floor, and then stands on the back of it, and then shows the underside and says that the Earth is also pressing upon him at 180 pounds.
No way.
It way, bro.
That doesn't make sense.
That
I
is
was like,
surreal.
what?
That is surreal.
Oh my god! Like
I couldn't get past
and
like the first 30 seconds of that. He was
dude,
doing that
That's awesome.
when he
I
was
can't.
doing that stuff with the feather, and I was done.
You know the video I'm talking about,
Yeah.
dude. Oh my god! I sat through the whole thing, but to be honest, like in the video itself, he says that there were plenty of experiments. I'm paraphrasing, but plenty of experiments that have realized Einstein's relativity, which means that there is no gravity. Those were his words. There is no gravity. It's space and time. That's it.
Man, it's weird how they're so willing to accept like all of these complex definitions to describe what's going on when they're simple descriptions that work already, but they just ignore those. They want like the most ridiculous, complicated explanations to explain what's going on.
Yeah, Occam's razor doesn't work.
I like to reference that Lottie works at McDonald's.
What which one's that?
Hey Ranty. Hey Ranty, how you doing?
Hello, how's it going?
Very well indeed. Good to have you.
So, Ranty.
What's the reference to Lottie at McDonald's?
I just want to get into some ad hom about some random troll.
Browns, please.
So yesterday, Ranty said that when he's on the show, there's at least 300 viewers, right? So we're currently at 253, and Ranty's just joined. So let's see if the show actually hits 300 now that he's joined. We've got at least 10 minutes left to see.
But that's normally from the start, Nathan. You can't do
right.
It
there's caveats now, is there? Caveats, I hear. He did actually preface it by saying me and Anthony. When Anthony and I are on, you get 300 people watching. Right, Ranty?
Well, that's true. Are we ever doing a second show later?
There might not be 300 people watching, but you can act like there is.
Why is anybody nervous right now?
Nervous about what?
We got 300 people watching us.
No, 250. Ranty, basically, we do get 300 people watching, but whenever it's happened, Ranty and Anthony has been in the panel, and Ranty asserts that he and Anthony are the cause. Obviously, correlation being causation.
Yeah, I see what's going on.
I filmed the Isle of Man today, by the way.
Yes.
What Ranty's doing is making a complex hypothesis into a scientific hypothesis.
That's correct.
By removing all the other variables and all the other factors that influence the show, and he's putting it down to me or Ranty or everybody. So actually, he's reduced. That's a baller tactic.
Yeah, correlation is not causation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is true though. There are some fan favorites that do attract like lots of people.
Oh, I'm not denying that Ranty's a fan favorite.
He has his own song. Come on.
I think yesterday's show where we just laughed continuously at what's his name, George Moose's words. I think that's going to probably be one of the best shows for a while because it's just so funny.
Yeah, a few people messaged me and told me it was an awesome show. I was just like, yep.
Right, let's stop holding each other's willies. I'm sure Ranty's got something to actually show us.
Yeah, I filmed the Isle of Man today.
Oh, wow.
First time I've seen it all year.
Excellent.
I've literally just downloaded it onto the PC now. So if you want to present me, I'll show you what I caught.
Yeah, you're on screen now.
Okay, obviously it's got a bit of an inferior mirage going on it. What you'll see in a minute is you'll see just how high it is in comparison over these turbines, for instance, in the background. And we know things get smaller with distance, obviously, but clear as a bell.
This is on a tripod, isn't it, Ranty?
It is. How did you know?
It's blatantly obvious.
Yes, I actually brought the tripod with me today.
So can we all give Ranty props and kudos for taking a tripod?
Hey!
Well done, Ranty. Seriously.
Yeah,
Much props, man.
Pat on the back.
You know what's really funny? Nathan, me and Lewis were having a back and forth over the Isle of Man stuff because it's been a while, and I wanted to see what his position was when, given that I went back and got it from the beach, and like everybody just ignores it. I wanted to see what his position was, and basically, he wanted to know how it was that I got such a level horizon without using a tripod. And I was like, "Oh, don't worry, it's coming. Don't worry." And when I showed him, he was like, "Yeah, that's pretty good."
Cutting in and out. Are you getting away from your microphone?
Oh, what? Sorry.
You were just cutting in and out at the end.
I hope it comes in. If it wants to come in, I'll hop out.
Beautiful footage. Thank you, Ranty.
No worries. I've done a video as well that I'm going to put it together. I'll be releasing it later. It might include the Isle of Man, but basically it's just something else. Since my last one was quite good.
So at the bottom of those turbines being cut off by the wave height.
They're not cut off.
And like the swells.
Further away. Further away. Things get smaller with distance. The assertion.
Further away. Inferior mirage. Compression.
Is there a tidal bulge happening there, by the way?
There's a tide. It's not a tidal bulge. Oh, could be feedback.
No, but you'll have a few waves, but they won't be very high. They'll maybe be 4 feet in height. I was quite at an elevation there to actually capture this. I was about 100 feet above sea level to capture it.
And those turbines have like a base sort of structure that they're sitting on that we can't see.
Well, you do see them.
Oh, you do see it? Yeah, because I remember someone mentioning that it has like a square sort of like base that it's resting on.
Can you pop them up
like
again? Can you pop your images up again, Ranty? As we round out the live show. Stay tuned if you're watching on Nathan Oakley.
Yeah, I think they're saying that there's like stilts, orange stilts that they sit on apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know where they've got that info from. So they must have seen it in one of these videos and said, "Oh, look, where's the stilts?"
There we go.
If it's beginning to mirror the top part of the stuff,
Yeah.
then that's going to overlay, isn't it? We know that the mirroring overlays.
Well, that's absolutely spot on, Anthony, because you can see the mirroring happening here on the yellow. So we've got the mirroring starting roughly around about here. It's reflecting the yellow down. And what happens is the white that's mirroring down on the yellow in the background ones is just blurring it out. It's overlapping it. Anything behind the inferior mirage you don't see. So if those yellow parts of the turbine are behind an inferior mirage, you're not going to see it. And the inferior mirage will be yellow because, will be white because it's higher up. So, I mean, come on, guys, you can't be all this work now. You can't literally be telling me that you don't know that this is what's happening. Even Anthony got it spot on right then.
I told you this yesterday.
Even
You
Anthony,
are the guru in this regard, and you can expect to have to say another.
Here we go. Whoa. Here we go.
Another 10
there we go.
times.
Look at that one. Look at that one. We've got the yellow that's squished, and then we've got white underneath it, and then we've got white underneath it, and the ones that are further away, they're mainly white now. So obvious, it's staring you in the face, guys.
Yep.
And with that, I'll say if you are watching this on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. However, if you're watching this on Nathan Oakley 1980 Live, then unfortunately this is where we bid you farewell. Massive thanks to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, comment, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. If you need to keep yourself occupied, go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community debate. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay tuned if you're watching on the premiering stream on Nathan Oakley channel.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!